Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm tremendous, man. How are you doing?
Man, I'm great. I am getting ready for a big weekend here. Excited to be catching up with you, doing another Something to Wrestle. But right here at the top of the show, I wanted to thank your lovely wife who sent Megan and I a very special present this holiday season. We have a very special wreath now, thanks to Mrs. Prichard. That's pretty cool, man. It's not often that we get anything fucking handmade like that. That was really, really special. I appreciate that. Thank you guys very much.
You're more than welcome. And you, what kind of fudge did you get this month?
You know, we should tell everybody you've been packing my fudge every month now. You got me the fudge of the month, and it came early, and there's nothing like a little early fudge. And, I didn't know why we had fudge, but we had fudge. And I got to tell you, Kansas and Morgan have been wearing it out. I got like one bite of last month. I don't know that I've even seen this month. I think it gets confiscated and goes downstairs and it's never heard from again.
Well, shit happens like that sometimes, but
it does.
But no, hey, my wife has been making all these goddamn wreaths. I say that because I wake up in the morning and the door down to the basement is wide open. And where the hell are you? And she's got stuff all over the place and has had a blast making these things. And just you guys were lucky on the list and had a Conrad custom wreath. Dude, Conrad custom Christmas wreath.
It was hung before I got home. Megan was so excited to have it. That. And I really appreciate it. It was, it's a very thoughtful gift. And speaking of thoughtful, last week, people thought it was one of our most thoughtful episodes ever. We tried to do our best to pay tribute to Pat Patterson. We were a day late, but we weren't $1 short. Most people are saying it was a top 5 all-time show for us, Bruce. A lot of people are even saying it was our very best show. What was the feedback you got about last week's tribute to Pat?
Whew. You know, I can probably speak a little better today than I could. I couldn't even tell you really what was on the show last week, but I got an overwhelming response on Twitter. I got an overwhelming response from so many people at TV that I came up that I never knew, that had never talked to me about listening to the show before, and came up and just hugged me. And it's like I got condolences and well wishes from people as if I lost, you know, my dad or my brother. And Pat was the equivalent, you know, to both in many, many ways. And I just, the overwhelming outpour of love, man, we got the greatest listeners in the world.
Oh, gosh.
We really did.
No doubt.
It's beautiful. And I felt it and I was so appreciative of it, but it was hard. It was hard. we got through it. You know what I mean? We got through it. And like I told you tonight, before we started, I don't know I'll ever be over it. I said, God damn, do you want to do part 2? Do you want to continue on? I've got a gazillion Pat Patterson stories, and maybe, now's the time. And you played last week with doing the whatever the hell you call it of his life. And I said, well, let's try and get through it, and maybe I'll do a few diversions along the way. But I think that Pat Patterson's contributions to the business that he and I loved so much is worthy of 2 shows, is worthy of 3 shows, is worthy of years of shows, because frankly, every show that we do has a Pat Patterson touch to it, because he had that much influence in the business and was one of the most influential people ever in the history of wrestling. So, yeah, the response was overwhelming, and I thought it was pretty cool, because it just shows how many people really truly loved Pat and realized how much he gave to the business.
In case you haven't already figured out, we're calling it yet another audible here. It's funny because earlier this week we dropped a sort of best of Pat Patterson, because Lord knows we've told a bunch of stories about Pat Patterson over the years, and he's been our special guest at a lot of different shows and events like Starcast and the Roast of Bruce. And so we didn't play any ads last week when Bruce was just sort of pouring his heart out. So earlier this week we had to deliver a full show, and so we saw, you know what, let's just do a best of Pat. And I sent Bruce the notes for last week's episode that we postponed to this week, Armageddon 05. And he pulled it up when we're getting ready to record. And he said, man, I just ain't into it. Can we talk about Pat a little more? And guys, here we go. I'm excited to do it. We had 46 pages of notes. We're going to try to get through most of it today. As you said though, Bruce, we could talk about Pat. We get lots of questions like, when are you guys doing a Vince McMahon episode? Every show is a Vince McMahon episode. And in a weird way, every show is a Pat Patterson episode, right?
Absolutely. And that's something that, Pat doesn't always get the credit that he deserved. And by God, we're devoting another one to him, because I love talking about him, and he's just such a wonderful human being.
As we talked just 3 days ago, Dave Meltzer tweeted out, I've come to the conclusion that Pat Patterson is the second most influential person in the North American wrestling industry of the past 40 years. The sad part is it should have been obvious 20 years ago. I thought that was pretty cool for Dave to acknowledge the contributions of Pat. And I think Triple H said something very similar. Of course, we know who they're talking about as number 1, but number 2, right behind Vince McMahon, that's kind of hard to argue when you really think about how big his influence really was. Wouldn't you agree?
Pat's influence not only in the WWE, but in the territories preceding the global expansion of the WWE. Everywhere that Pat went, Pat had impact. And from San Francisco to Minneapolis to New York, Montreal, everywhere that Pat went, he had tremendous influence and was able to make change and adapt and create. Once Pat's days in the ring were over, Pat fell right into the creative role with Vince, and I dare say nobody could touch him.
Chris Jericho has referred to Pat in the past. I believe he used the phrase, he's wrestling's Yoda. I thought that was such a great description of Pat Patterson. Is he far off base, or do you agree with that assessment?
No, I wholeheartedly agree with that, because no matter what it was, Pat had an opinion about it, good, bad, or indifferent. And even if it was bad or was something that Pat didn't feel and or see, it was something that Pat would weigh in on and create something better out of it. It was always what the fuck? We always do it that way. Let's do something different. Fuck them. And he would find ways to make things different. You wouldn't have, if Pat Patterson were an agent on a live event, you wouldn't have the same show night after night.
Right.
That's boring to Pat. He would change it up every single night just to entertain himself, when he was, entertaining the live audience and entertaining the locker room and trying to keep it fun for the talent so that, they didn't have to do the same old shit every single night. And I remember there was Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels had this incredible program. They're working all over the place. And we went to the Nassau Coliseum one night, and Perfect and Shawn were having a match. It's for the Intercontinental title. And we're sitting there, and on the way there, and Pat starts laughing, and he says, "Brucey, let me throw this at you. What if instead of they have not one match, they have 4 matches tonight?" And where he was going is we did the match, and they had a finish. He ran down a second referee. No. Perfect cheated. He did this, he did that. And they restarted the match. They restarted the match with 2 referees. Now this time the 2 referees are in there, and big, they have a big, the fucking both referee knocked out. You send the 3rd referee down there. You start the match over. Then they have a count out. Then they say, "Fuck you. We're not going to end it like that." Then you have but it made basically 4 matches out of the damn thing. And it was so much fun because he basically got everybody on the damn card back involved somehow, some way. And you just didn't have a match that had a finish. You got a match that basically turned into 4 matches with 4 different finishes. And it was a nice roller coaster ride. And that's just the way that he would look at everything on a nightly basis and take it there. So that was his way.
Let's talk about Pat's first influence in wrestling. I think as a kid, he got to see Buddy Rogers, and that was probably his biggest influence, right? His first favorite wrestler and the person who made him such a big fan of the sport.
Yeah. When you look at it, and the blonde hair and the flashy ring jackets and everything. And I actually have one of Pat's ring jackets downstairs in the cedar closet somewhere. Stephanie wanted me to wear it to TV last week in his honor, but I keep it all wrapped up and safe down there. But yeah, it was definitely an influence with the blonde hair and just the larger than life persona. And that was something Pat loved the show. It was, he could do all the gaga and shit in between the bell, but Pat loved the pomp and circumstance in the show. And that's what was important.
His 2 favorite wrestlers though, when he's first, becoming a fan, probably Buddy Rogers and Killer Kowalski. Would you agree? I mean, we've heard him tell the story about waiting to carry Killer's bags and get an autograph, and he kept it all the way through the end of his life, which is pretty remarkable that you still have your first wrestling autograph.
Yeah, and those guys were big stars in Montreal, and especially Kowalski. So for Pat to be able to see them, and then, and then later years, as we say sometimes, be careful about meeting your idols and things like that. I think that, Buddy Rogers sometimes wasn't the most popular guy backstage, and Kowalski on the other end of that spectrum. I think Walter throughout his entire life, and especially in the business, was one of the most well-respected and beloved individuals ever in the business. Just probably too nice for the business, which is funny when you consider Kowalski's character throughout his entire career, Killer Kowalski, and being a horrible heel.
I think he sort of got his start in a very similar fashion to you. Of course, you started selling posters and programs. He was selling hot dogs at the matches. It's sort of fascinating to think about guys like Paul Heyman, ringside photographer, same with Jim Cornette, you and your brother both selling gimmicks, Pat selling hot dogs. Back then, I mean, this was your way in the business, right? And you guys weren't just starting, when you're fresh out of high school, you're starting while you're still school age kids.
Because that's where the love came from. And it was the desire to do any and everything in the business. You had to figure out a way to get in, and you had to figure out a way to be seen and to be productive. And if you didn't produce, nobody wanted to have anything to do with you. But if you were there and you were able to make some extra money for the talent or the promoter, then that caught their eye. And anytime that you put a few more dollars in their pocket, that definitely caught their eye.
Let's talk a little bit about Pat, because one of the first things he's going to have to overcome to be an American wrestling star is he doesn't speak English. And well, what he does speak is not very good, but allegedly he learned a lot from watching television. And of all things, he credits The Price is Right to learning how to speak English.
Yeah. And it's funny. And when you listen to people that come to the country that don't speak English and they learn from television or they learn from radio without ever really understanding. And people go back and I know we've kind of skipped over Pat's childhood and everything, but Pat grew up in a very, very poor family, and he went to Catholic school, and he had several brothers and sisters that they didn't have showers and they didn't have a bathtub where they lived. There was a toilet at the end of the hall, but they had to go down to like a shower house and a bathhouse type thing. His sisters would go to one, and then he and his brothers would go to another one. And for the whole family, this is including his mother, his father, I think 2 or 3 sisters, and his brothers, they had one bar of soap. And one would go in and wash, and then they would come out and they would give the other the bar of soap. And you had to protect that bar of soap, and it had to last at least a week. So it's, it wasn't something that Pat was born with a silver spoon in his mouth or anything. He grew up hard times in a family that was very poor, and against all odds succeeded and was able to come out of that and make it in an entertainment industry in a foreign country that he made his way in, which I think is pretty cool when you think of those hardships.
He wrote in his book that he spent his first week in Boston and he didn't speak any English. So he winds up eating the same thing every day, hamburger steak, because he had no idea what everything else was. I think sometimes we take that for granted, that when guys come over here who don't speak the language, or maybe an American goes over yonder, as we say down south, you're way out of sorts. You're by yourself. You're trying to just figure it out. Wound up eating a lot of hamburger steak.
Exactly. And, he pointed a lot too, which is when you would have someone come over from a foreign country, like the Japanese talent or the French talent, German talent, a lot of times they liked Denny's. You know why? Denny's always had a picture on the menu. So they could look at the menu and they could point, and they saw the picture and know, I want that. And as you know, kind of like the fast food chains, what the picture is on the menu isn't always exactly what you get. But up until the day that he died, Pat loved his hamburger steak.
I like that. I like when you're cracking one open. Let's talk about Louie. We got lots of comments about Louie because you and I talked a lot about their relationship last week, but I don't think we really even scratched the surface on the relationship with Louie. Mr. Flair has once told me about going to hang out at their house, and he referred to their multi-level house in the woods as the tree house, but I think you had a different name for that property, right?
Well, it actually did have a name. And, when Pat first, saw this house and he came back and he was like looking at it and he's telling us about it. And he's like, I think it had like 122 windows in it, some ridiculous number of windows. Every single window in the place was a different size and different shape. So it had, I think 3 levels to it. One of the master bedrooms had a second story to it, which that's a whole nother story that probably shouldn't tell. But it had 12 lofts in the house. So there were 12 different lofts that overlooked different rooms throughout the house. And so when Pat was, describing this house, and he go, "Oh, but you got to see it. It's such a gimmick." That the house then became, when Pat moved in, Vince got him a sign to put out in the front door, "Chez Gimmick," in French. So it was the Gimmick House, Chez Gimmick, not Chez Gimmick, Gimmick. Because you got to have that French flair on there. Not Ric Flair, but the other kind of flair.
Got it.
Okay.
Let's talk a little more about Louie. I think, if my research is correct, Pat came to Boston to wrestle in 1962, and he's starting to learn the language, and he also learns the love language for Mr. Louie Dondero. They met in 62 in Boston, which is pretty remarkable. I think Louie passed away in 98, and they were together the entire time. That's one of those rare wrestling relationships. We often make reference to the successful wrestling marriages because that's pretty uncommon. But Arn Anderson's been married forever and ever. And Pat Patterson was sort of married forever and ever. You and the missus have made it a long time. It's rare, but Pat was with Louie from 62 to 98.
Yeah. Longer than a lot of marriages, and happily as well. And I think that Louie, helped Pat get by, helped teach him English, and just a lot about the United States in general. But, Louie, I think, also helped teach Pat an awful lot about life, like he did with everybody. And Louie had such a way of talking that he could disarm anyone, just by talking, and had an infectious laugh as well that would just kind of bring you in. And Louie could explain things in just the simplest of terms that you went, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it." And was a very special person that loved Pat and kind of made it all complete. And as Jim Cornette, talked about, that there was a time in WWE where I didn't have a last name, or Pat didn't have a last name. It was Bruce and Pat, or Pat and Bruce.
Yeah.
We were always mentioned together in the same breath. Well, it was the same thing with Louie. It was Pat and Louie.
Yeah.
And they had just a very special bond and love that carried on for a hell of a long time. And it was really incredible, especially when you think about living their lifestyle in the wrestling business, in a macho business.
I can't believe this is real, Bruce, but as you and I are recording right now, literally just a few moments ago, it was reported that Tommy Tiny Lister, Zeus, has passed away at just 62 years old.
Holy shit.
Wow.
Wow.
That was a big part of my childhood, and we had already had it on the, I think we've even promoted it here on the show, that one of our upcoming episodes, we had planned to do a no holds barred watch along. We've even joked that the only thing better than why have a regular Christmas when you can have a no holds barred Christmas? Well, that's what we're still planning to do, but my goodness, I didn't hope it would be a memorial piece for Zeus, dude.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sure I've told the story before of doing the live events with Zeus to promote No Holds Barred, the movie. Before the movie was coming out, I would do Brother Love shows all over the country with Tiny. And my job was basically indoctrinate Tiny to the business and get him through this stuff, and go out and have a Brother Love show and an entertaining segment. But you're getting Zeus over and teaching Tiny to be Zeus 24/7 and everything. So we are in the ring in St. Louis. No, it doesn't matter where the fuck we were. We were in the ring, and goddamn Tiny has got so much heat, and the people are going fucking nuts for him and all this shit. And he's just standing in the middle of the ring. And the only thing that he did well was slap himself, and goddamn sweat would go everywhere. And he's standing there, just standing, and the heat is rising. And I said, all right, big man. I said, go get over there get on the second rope. I said, slap the living shit out of yourself. I said, growl. I said, hit all four corners. And he's just standing there, not doing shit. I'm like, God, come on now. God damn it, Zeus. Let's go. Get up on the second rope. Knock the shit out of yourself. Growl at him. Ah! And I'm yelling at him. And he's not doing shit. So finally, I was like, God, fuck, let's go. We get back to the dressing room. And he had a private dressing room. And we walk in. And I said, Tiny? I said, Jesus Christ, man. I said, you got to listen to me out there. When I'm telling you to do shit, you got to do it. And he looks me dead in the eye, just the one eye, and says, oh, were you talking to me? Motherfucker, there were only two people in the ring. Who the fuck did you think I was talking to? But I just never forget that. He just looked me just dead in the eye and goes, oh, you were talking to me? But great guy, and he took a lot of abuse and ribbing in the locker room because he was an outsider. And God damn, that's a shame. That sucks. That really sucks. You showed me what's the famous clip? What was the character that he portrayed with the guy with the bicycle?
Oh, Debo.
Debo.
You had never seen, I can't believe this is real, folks, but years ago when Bruce and I were hanging out for like one of the first times, he had never seen Friday. Had not even a foggy idea what we were talking about.
What's Friday?
Exactly.
Okay. But that was good. Debo made him cry. I like that shit.
Man, let's try to switch gears here. We'll talk about Zeus, in a few weeks.
Hey, well, let's start. Okay. And I'm going to take a left turn on you. You know how I told the story, I guess. And seriously, as I told you last night, I don't remember the show that we did last week. It just kind of, I guess, was in a zone and did it. And I told the story about sitting in Giovanni's with Pat, not being his type.
Yeah. Well,
I just want to let you know something, man.
Uh-oh.
I have been told by several attractive gay men that I was their type and that they do, man.
Oh, God.
Just letting you know. I'm just letting you know, Connie.
Just because Efren tweeted you doesn't mean anything.
Well, I've always known about Efren. I mean, that's a whole nother thing, man.
Let's get back to Pat Patterson.
Efren's my current day Pat Patterson.
He is honored by that, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. But no, I had others. Not just one.
Why are you bragging about this?
Goddamn attractive man, Connie.
You got the taco meat out right now.
What does that mean?
It means that the top 4 buttons of your shirt are not buttoned.
That's not true. It's just 2.
And you're just letting that, no, there's at least 3.
Why did that one get unbuttoned?
See, exactly.
I don't know how that one got unbuttoned.
This is the worst.
Yes, I do. But anyway.
What does that mean? Yes, you do.
I remember how I got unbuttoned. I unbuttoned it.
Did the missus come rub some Vicks vapor rub on you or something? Kill that Corona?
What's wrong with that? I don't understand the taco meat. What the fuck does that mean?
Well, like, look at mine. Like, see, it's like, you got that fair hair. I got the darker.
It's your hair.
Yeah, but it's darker. It looks, never mind. All right. So Andre the Giant, there was a great clip of, and certainly some incredible pictures of Pat on Andre's shoulders that you guys showed in the tribute video for WWE. They had a great relationship, both, Frenchmen, if you will. They both spoke French and both traveled the towns. And a lot of times, you would even have Pat driving the big van and Andre in the back, right?
Fuck yeah. And they were French Canadians, so they were able to speak French to one another and truly loved one another. So that it was a special relationship with Pat and the Boss. One time in the old days when they used to do TV in Allentown and Hamburg, Pennsylvania, there was this one hotel that they would all stay at. And Andre actually got to the point where Andre just drank too much. And Andre started to go back to his room and decided that, I'm sleepy, giant sleepy. And Andre just laid down in the middle of the lobby where the elevators were. Passed out. It's 3:00 in the morning. I'm tired. I sleep here. So fucking Andre lays down, like literally in the middle of the goddamn hotel. They try to wake him up. And Pat says, fuck this. Pat goes in the restaurant, gets a couple of big tablecloths, and just lays the tablecloths over Andre. And they go, what the fuck are you going to do? I said, what the fuck am I going to do? What the fuck are you going to do? You tried to wake him. And Pat went to bed. And they said about 9:30 in the morning, Andre started to wake up, came to life, much to the chagrin of people in the hotel. But yeah, people had to walk around a giant draped in tablecloths. Just another night in the bar.
It's interesting that another thing that Andre and Pat have in common is more than just speaking French and being in the wrestling business. They're both building blocks for Vince McMahon when he tries to take over and go national. Of course, Andre is going to be one of the great attractions, going even back to Vince's father. But Pat Patterson is going to be sort of the brains behind the operation. I don't think that maybe gets covered enough, that it's two French guys.
Well, I don't think that really matters as much. I mean, Pat was French Canadian and Andre was real French. France French. There's a difference. There is definitely a difference, but by God, it was two of the biggest attractions in the business that we can thank the French people for. In Andre and Pierre Clermont, Pat Patterson, the Lord Patrick Patterson for a while. I'll tell you, all you farmers out there. Now, let me ask you a question. Did you see the tribute that WWE did for Pat Patterson?
I did. It was wonderful.
It was wonderful. So, in the My Way was used.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was Sinatra singing.
Sure.
As well as Pat singing.
Okay.
I don't think people actually knew that Pat was a singer and that Pat loved to sing.
Oh, of course they know that.
But I don't know that everybody knew that.
Okay.
We know that because Pat would come to our shows you remember early on, you wanted Pat. Remember I told you, I said, hey, I talked to Patterson. He's coming to the show. And you're like, fuck you. No, he's not. That's back when nobody would talk to me at WWE.
Isn't that crazy that wasn't that long ago?
Yeah, last week.
And maybe again next week.
Maybe again next week. Who knows? But, yeah, Pat, we were going to be in the same place at the same time. And he called to say hello. And I was like, Patrick, I'm doing these shows. Oh, what the fuck? What the fuck's a podcast? And talked Pat into us. Well, why don't you come down? And he goes, I want to go do karaoke. And it hit me. I said, well, Pat, come do karaoke at the show. And I figured it out at that moment, how we could get Pat to as many shows as we did.
Just let him sing.
I would promise Pat that he could sing.
Yeah. And
we made him sit through 2 hours of our show before we would give him a microphone and let him sing, because he would have been there all night.
In fairness, though, it was, it was probably a bigger crowd than there was at the karaoke bar. And that's what Pat lived for, right? Entertaining the crowd.
Oh God. He absolutely loved it. And Pat would go on cruises, and it was the same story every time, because Pat liked to go in and shock people. Loved to do Louie Anderson, His Wonderful Life and all that. and Our Wonderful World, whatever the fuck it is. Okay. It's, I'm over here having beverages. But Pat would go in and he would tell the story about the cruise. He goes, I would sit there and I would go, I want to go sing, but I don't know. I'm shy. I don't like to do it in front of people. And I would get the people around me and they go, no, Pat, you go up and you sing. You want to sing. It's okay. We're not going to judge you. And I say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. He goes, and then I milk it along for about an hour or so. And then I have a few pops and I buy them a few drinks. They buy me a few drinks. And they go, come on, Pat, please sing. And then I go up there and, oh boy, let me tell you something. Oh boy, I belt out. Then I go into Louis Armstrong. They go, oh, they're crying, Bruce. I tell you, they're crying. And it would be the same. It would be the same fucking story every week. He'd come back from vacation, and he would work another group of people into thinking he was just this poor old man out taking a cruise by himself. And he's shy, but we're going to bring it out of him. And they love me.
Let me. I gotta ask. You've talked a lot about the karaoke stuff. Tell us some karaoke stories where you went to karaoke with him, and, and hypothetically, did Vince ever go?
Actually, yeah, we at Bobby Valentine's in Norwalk, man, they used to have the karaoke, and that's kind of where it started with Pat, because they would have, it was a sports bar in Norwalk. We used to go there because it was close. It was kind of in the middle of where Pat lived and where I lived, and Bobby Valentine used to come in all the time and sit with us and drink. And it was a lot of fun. And he would have karaoke on certain nights. And Pat loved to go watch the people make fools of themselves. But then the rib was, they would go put my name down on, you know, how you'd go up to the DJ
Sure.
and you have to write your name down and shit. So they'd go put my name down and I would go up and make a fool out of myself. And at that time it was, you know, I didn't take it seriously, even though I'm a great singer. Spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight. So anyway, one day he puts my fucking name on the thing, and I get up there, and this drunk girl comes up on stage, goes, I'm going to sing with you. And we sang that Olivia Newton-John, John Travolta thing. You're the one that I want. You're the one I want. Do, do, do. You're the one that I want. You know, it was Sandy sang her part, and then the other guy sang his part, and back and forth. I was good. You know the song I'm thinking.
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about. And
summer loving happens so fast.
What was Vince's song?
Oh, he wouldn't get up there for shit. He would just sing a song.
Hang on now. This is the same guy who did Stand Back, right?
Yeah. Stand back, stand back. Yeah.
This is the guy
baby, watch him drop. Baby, 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 watch him drop. Watch him drop. Stand back. Shake that ass, bitch.
This is a guy who dances on TV, drops his pants on TV. He's been humiliated in every possible way, peed his pants on TV, but he's not going to sing in a bar of 30 people.
No, Shane and I sang. Shane and I got thrown out of karaoke at Bobby Valentine's.
What do you got to do to get thrown out of karaoke?
I'll tell you what you got to do. Aerosmith. No, not Aerosmith. Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, on Steel Horse I Ride. I've seen them, but you know, so it gets to the horse I ride. I've seen a million faces and I've rocked them all. Well, I always used to change that line to, well, I've seen a million faces and I fucked them all. And that'll get you thrown out of karaoke.
Well, but you're a heel, so you were, you know, fucking over the faces.
Yeah, but we got thrown out.
Well, that's not fair. They just don't.
I wasn't done.
Let's talk about old school wrestling again. In his book, Pat would say that he thought Roy Shire, Eddie Graham, and Dory Funk Sr. were on the short list of wrestling geniuses. I want to come back to that, but first let me continue. He says, there are many other good painters out there, but don't get me wrong. Not everybody can be a Picasso, but Ray Stevens, as far as a wrestling performance goes, also has a place on that short list. He got it right, and he got it right all the time. It seemed like everything came to him naturally and that he never had to struggle to learn anything. Shawn Michaels might be the best comparison I can give you to understand how good Ray Stevens was. Ray was a prodigy. He also tells a story that once upon a time in the San Francisco territory, unbelievably, Ray was voted most hated wrestler of the year, and the same year he won most popular wrestler of the year. So Ray Stevens was one of a kind and one of Pat's very best friends in wrestling. And their tag team, we talked about a little bit last week, but man, I got blown up with people looking for recommendations for Pat Patterson, Ray Stevens matches. What can you tell us about Ray Stevens and their duo, man?
God damn, they were the best. And Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, because they came through Houston a couple of times, but for whatever, I tell you how good they were, was that my mother, who took us to wrestling every week, and her favorite was Johnny Valentine, but anybody else she really didn't care about. However, Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, she never forgot, and thought that they were two of the most handsome wrestlers she had ever seen, but thought that they were the most exciting and the best wrestlers she had ever seen. They had that kind of impact. Ray Stevens was an absolute natural, could do anything and everything and do it without, he could be drinking all night long, all day long, and go in the ring and steal the show. Here's the difference between the two. Pat could do the same thing. Pat would tell you that he had to work at it. Difference is, Ray couldn't tell you how he did what he did.
Right.
Ray couldn't tell you why he did what he did. Ray just in the moment did what he did better than anybody else. Pat had to think about it, but Pat could tell you why he did every single move in every single match. Now, and you're going to try and stop me, but I'm going to clean it up. It's okay. Pat, the first time that Pat was with us at a show, Pat told a story.
Oh God.
Okay. And Pat is working with Ray Stevens. Pat had just turned babyface. The two of them had been tag team partners, and Ray Stevens is the heel.
Let me give context here.
Okay.
You and I are hearing this story on stage with a live mic in front of, I don't know, 600 paying, super supportive, super psyched to be there, Something to Wrestle fans. And I don't know, 2017, maybe 2018. And we're just happy that Pat's there. And he asks if he can tell a story. And of course we say, sure, here you go.
So Pat's telling the story about him and Ray working in San Francisco, and Pat had just turned babyface, and Ray gets him in the corner, and Ray is on Pat. It bing, a bing, and then a bang, a bing, and beat the shit out of me in the corner. And there's one guy we hear in the crowd, and he stands up and goes, "Hey, Stevens, you're a," and called Ray a derogatory
F word.
name.
Yeah, an F word.
An F word we will not repeat on this show because it is not appropriate.
But Pat said this into a microphone.
But Pat says it in our show. And the audience goes dead silent.
Yeah.
Conrad and I are looking at each other going, what the fuck? And then there was that pregnant pause. And Pat looks around, and I mean, dead silence. He goes, I looked at Ray and I said, boy, if they only knew. And the fucking crowd explodes.
Yeah.
I tried to tell that story. Our next show. Hey, Pat Patterson told a story. I got dead silence, and it remained dead silent. And Conrad's like, Bruce, don't ever tell that story again.
Please. What's so funny is when we finished last week, I'm telling Silva afterwards, I'm like, hey man, I think that's going to be one of our best shows we ever did. He said, oh, Pat's got so many great stories with Bruce. And then a few minutes later, he says, hey, did he tell the No, he didn't tell that story. We can't tell that story. No, that's
And so yeah, I segue that into Pat and Ray. And Pat would tell these fucking stories about traveling with Ray Stevens. Now, Ray Stevens was a whore. No other way to say it. Ray loved.
He was a playboy.
Ray was a playboy, man. Ray loved to party. Ray loved to fight. And Ray loved to fuck. And Ray, didn't give a shit. He wasn't turning anything down but the covers. So Ray Stevens he's traveling with Pat. So he would say, hey, Pat, I got this girl tonight, but I need you to take care of the mom for me. And Pat would be like, okay, Ray, I'll take care of her. I'll, buy her drinks or whatever. He goes, no, I need you to take care of her for me, Pat. And boy, I don't want to know. It's disgusting. I don't want to touch it in the face. But Pat would do his part, from time to time to appease Ray. And after a while, he was like, you take care of your own thing. I'll do my thing. I don't ask you to go and take care of somebody's father for me. So don't ask me to take care of somebody's mother for you. That was kind of relationship they had. But Pat, hey man, Pat took one for the team every once in a while.
I'm glad you used that phrase. Meltzer wrote in his obituary, which by the way, I highly recommend. I don't know that you read it. I know you hate Pat. I know you hate.
I wouldn't read anything.
He put him over real strong. I think he'd like it. Here's one of the paragraphs though. The two became close friends, talking about Pat and Ray. Close enough that Patterson on occasion would quote unquote take one for the team, since Stevens loved chasing women. And sometimes the women that he chased had friends. There was a famous story in that period when Stevens was dating Ann Calvello, a legendary roller derby heel. She had a reputation for being tremendous in bed and for being with famous athletes after her breakup with Charlie O'Connell, the biggest star in roller derby. She was actually the most popular female skater on the Bay Bombers, who were at their peak in the 60s, beating Bonanza, the top rated TV show in the country, head to head on Sunday night in the ratings. After her breakup with O'Connell went to promoter Jerry Seltzer and said either she goes or he goes. O'Connell was his biggest star, and Seltzer forced Calvello off the Bombers, and she had to skate as a heel and then became the top heel in the game. Fast forward, Calvello has her own touring schedule, but when they have free time, all three hang out. Pat Patterson, Ray Stevens, and Ann. And they're pretty big TV celebrities at the time, so everybody knows when they're hanging out. And everybody knows about this Stevens-Calvello relationship. Well, eventually there's a famous story where, she claims to have gotten Pat Patterson. As the story goes, Ray passed out drunk and Calvello was not going to not have sex that night. So her only choice was Patterson, who had no interest. As the story went, she punched him to tell him she was serious and he acquiesced. And by the way, as crazy as this sounds, he told Ric Flair and I the same story at a bar in St. Louis in 2014, which is just make believe. Nope. You're going to do it or I'm going to beat your ass.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. Close his eyes and pretend it's, Rock Hudson or whatever.
Oh, listen to you. What's wrong with you?
What? No, I'm telling you. But Ann Calvello used to come to the shows.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, fuck yes, man. And still look good in her later years.
So you were like nudging Pat, man, I can't believe you. Damn it.
Introduce me. Yeah. I was like, hey. So anyway, maybe, yeah, I was my younger days. Just what I'm saying. But absolutely. And Pat, oh God, he would tell these stories, and I can't tell the best one about there was a young lady in Australia that ran like the hotel and stuff, and Pat was going to take one for the team one night because she was so good to everybody and she loved Pat that she thought she could, bring him to the other side. And he said he tried. He was like, bro, I tried. I get down there and I look and out of pace. I can't. And he just couldn't do it. Bless his heart.
Let's talk a little bit about Pat, the wrestler. He first comes to back then everybody called the company New York. So he first comes to New York and they want to put him right away against the champion, Bob Backlund. This is in 79. He mentioned Bob in a very, very favorable way, in his Hall of Fame speech that I watched last week. And we've often talked about Bob as sort of the transitional guy. I mean, he was champion for a long time, but it felt like business was super hot with Bruno. It maintained and maybe dipped a little bit with Bob Backlund, but the next big run for the company is going to be with Hulk Hogan. What was that relationship like with Pat and Bob?
At first, it was, I don't know that Bob necessarily trusted Pat because, Bobby was an incredible amateur wrestler and Bob was the champion in the Garden. And I think that some people believe Bob was made champion to prove a point to Bruno Sammartino. And as time went on, Bobby had his own following there. And the challenge was who can have a great match with Bob Backlund. And I think that Pat looked at that and saw an opportunity with Bobby being similar size. Pat wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but the way that Pat worked, and he was a nasty heel, that Pat actually got, normally you would get one shot at the champ, maybe two. Some guys got three. Pat got 4 out of Backlund.
That was a record, by the way. No one had gotten a world title shot 4 times. To further explain what you were saying, they're going to try you challenging for the title on top. If you're a good draw, maybe you'll get a second time, but you've got to keep those sellouts going. And if you're drawing really strong houses, they'll keep doing it. But when it starts to taper, they're going to move on to the next challenger. And they went with Pat, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times, which was a record at the time.
Right. And the crazy thing about it was when you look back at New York in the time, the managers just made TV. So you had Fred Blassie, Albano, the Grand Wizard, those guys, they only appeared on TV and they didn't go to all of the live events, but they all made the Garden. However, all they did in the Garden was they would walk out with whoever they managed, and then they would come back to the dressing room before the match started. So you never had, like every other territory, you didn't have a manager that stayed at ringside. Too much heat. Oh my God, you can't have a manager at ringside. There's just too much heat. And Pat convinced Vince Sr. to allow the Grand Wizard to stay at ringside for their third match and everything. And he was also able to stay there and had Skolin in Backlund's corner. And it was just incredible, just the business that they did, the fact that he was able to come back and do it 4 times. And that's also where you get to the Pat, the double knockouts, and don't move and lay there like a douchebag, and you fucking lay still, don't move a pinky. And for the boys that heard that and would go back and tell me how much they loved, Pat explaining that to him and how antsy it is when you're a performer and you're in the middle of the ring and you're laying there and you hear the audience all around you. And instinct is you want to move, you want to start selling, you want to make some kind of movement.
You're full of adrenaline.
Yeah, but if you just lay there and you don't move a muscle, the swell of the audience that comes up, and you can feel that audience get hotter and hotter and hotter because nothing's happening and they're anticipating. Now it's who's going to move first. And he goes back to Backlund, and Pat talks about, screaming at Backlund in the ring, don't fucking move. And how Bobby just almost couldn't help himself, but did, and came back afterwards like, that was the most incredible feeling ever. So it was, Pat working with Backlund, Pat with Sergeant Slaughter. Holy shit. Their boot camp match that they had, which is one of the greatest matches you'll ever see. It was just pure magic because of the heat that Sarge had. Pat by that time was a babyface, but it was like, holy shit. It hadn't been done. And people in the New York area, in the Garden, whether they realized it or not, they were seeing history with Pat doing the first time having four returns in a row with the champion. It was history. That was Pat. That was Pat's idea. Those were Pat's finishes that he came up with the old man, as he says, and constantly would even then be thinking of different ways to coming up with finish, not just for himself, but for other guys on the card.
Right in the middle of this series of matches with Bob Backlund is when Pat becomes the first Intercontinental Champion. And you've told a hilarious story before about why this fictitious tournament happened where it happened. First, I guess, explain, I know you weren't there, but you know the story. The reason the Intercontinental title was created, number one. Number two, how easy it was to explain how there was a new belt back then. And number three, the real reason it happened where it quote unquote happened.
Well, they created this new championship. They had a North American championship, needed something bigger than North American, hence the Intercontinental Championship. But they were just creating a championship and needed a champion. So Pat was going to be the first Intercontinental Champion. Okay. But he's got to basically debut the belt and this new championship. So Vince Jr., when they're talking about, well, how do we do this? This is simple. We have a tournament. Okay. But we don't actually have to have a tournament. It's just we tell them about a tournament that took place somewhere. And you've got to understand that in the 70s, and it was a simpler era, maybe a more innocent era. We didn't have internet. People weren't as worldly as they are now. And your geography and history is what you learned in school and what you retained. So to an audience in New York and in the Northeast, you could name any far away, like Tunisia. Nobody knows where the fuck Tunisia is. But it sounds exotic.
Oh, God.
All right. When Mark Lewin used to talk about Singapore and Kevin Sullivan talking about, he would just make up names and shit of faraway places. You know where Oil Trough, Texas? You know where Oil Trough, Texas is?
No.
Okay. You know where Dallas is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's nowhere near there. Anyway, you have these places that this shit happened, and they just explain. And Pat, with his French accent, had a hard time pronouncing words sometimes.
Sure.
So Vince gave him he says, where'd I win the title? He says, Rio de Janeiro. And Pat said, what? Rio de Janeiro. Rio Janeiro. What? And the more that Pat would butcher the name, the more that Vince would insist.
Has to be now.
He would tell people, now, Patrick, Pat Patterson, the new Intercontinental Champion. Pat, tell us about this tournament. Where was the tournament held? And it was Rio. And Pat just shortened everything to Rio because he couldn't say De Janeiro. To the day he passed, he couldn't say De Janeiro.
And
that wasn't in Rio. Fuck you.
Hey, by the way, really cool little tribute that you guys did to him last week on SmackDown, showing the first Intercontinental title and all that. I think a lot of people on Twitter wanted to say, hey man, they should, whenever they need to crown a new champion, they should have a Pat Patterson Memorial Intercontinental title tournament or something. But it was really cool to see, as a belt nerd, how different the belts looked, back then to now. And for that to be there on that night, pretty cool.
Yeah, I've got that belt sitting in my office.
Well, there you go.
You want to see it?
I would love to see it.
Okay. I'll show you one day. It's in the office at the office, not the office here.
Right.
His
You
house.
got many offices now.
I got many offices.
You got a TV office,
gigantic Christmas tree here. Yeah, I got this office. I got that office out there where the Christmas tree is. I got the office in the office.
Then you got the office in the sky.
I got the office in the skizzy.
And you got the office at TV.
I got the office at TV.
Hey, this is I know we're not talking about new stuff, but you're getting a new office tomorrow, right?
I guess I am. Yeah. Be interesting.
After all of these matches that he's had with Bob Backlund, and I think these matches are some of the things that Pat was most proud of in his WWE career. He had that famous match that I think a lot of our listeners watched for the last time, or for the first time last week, against Sergeant Slaughter. I mean, it really was a pretty remarkable match, and I've seen interviews since where he talked about how he couldn't believe watching that match back, all the crazy stuff he did. That was a pretty revolutionary match at the time, was it not? Sarge and Pat at MSG.
Definitely. I think the blood and guts aspect of it, and no rules, no referee, and all that shit. It was different, and Pat loved to do that. He loved to create something that you hadn't seen before. Put a new twist on something instead of having a Texas death match or a cage match. Come up with this boot camp match and do all kinds of gaga and at a pace. And people to this day, I think, still go back and go, holy shit, man. Patterson and Sarge in the Garden in the boot camp match, and Sarge wearing the white singlet that was just covered in blood by the end of it, and just pure magic. It was little things that Patterson did. Like if you ever watch him when he throws a punch, every punch Pat would rear back and throw the fucking punch. Pat threw punches, which was the beauty of his work and what he did. Everything meant something. And if you're going to do it better than anybody else.
Let's give everybody the date if they want to go watch it. May 4th, 1981. It's an alley fight in Madison Square Garden. Meltzer would note in the obituary last week, it was one of the earliest tape trader classics. And it's also been mentioned that right before his death, like in the last week or two, they showed it at the Performance Center right before NXT started. And they played the entire match on the screens, and the building was cheering like they were seeing it really for the first time. And it was a bloodbath, easy for me to say, but it won match of the year that year. And even Howard Finkel called it one of the greatest matches in Madison Square Garden history. So go out of your way.
And I got to correct myself. I called it a boot camp match. It was really an alley fight that later on became Sarge's boot camp match, but yes.
Either way, that match happens when Pat was actually already starting to do commentary. And we didn't spend a lot of time talking about Pat as a commentator last week. We spent a lot of time talking about him as a singles performer and as a tag team wrestler, and certainly as a behind the scenes figure. But let's talk about Pat, the commentator. Did you get to see much of his work on commentary?
He was the shits. And Vince used to love to throw shit to him. And when you go back, and they used to do interviews with the talent at ringside. So Vince would a lot of times take the guys that could talk and carry an interview. You know, all you got to do is stick a microphone in front of Morocco and he goes off for 10 minutes. But Vince used to love to give Pat Bruno and Backlund and Frankie Williams and the guys that couldn't talk their way out of a brown paper bag, and go, okay, Pat, you got 5 minutes. You're interviewing Backlund. Go. I'm here with WWF champion Bob Backlund. Bob, you got a big match coming up with Morocco. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm real excited about facing Don Morocco. He's a real tough competitor, and I think I can beat him.
Is there anything that you have studied with your opponent, Don Morocco?
He's very tough, and I'm going to look out for that Asiatic spike. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the base. You could just see Pat. They're a minute in, and Pat has used up everything he's got.
Right.
And has no fucking where, not a clue. And it is some of the most entertaining in a really bad way shit to watch, to just go back and watch him get through some of these interviews. And then on the contrary, you know, he would put him with Albano. And Albano would just be smashed out of his mind and be going off and running all around, and Pat could never get any of his shit out because Albano's spewing off at the mouth about a BB in a canary's brain and all this other shit, and didn't have a fucking clue. But the other thing about it is during that time, this is a good Pat Patterson rib, is Albano and Freddie Blassie traveled together. Now, Fred Blassie was a fashion plate in real life, man. Freddie was dressed to the nines. Freddie did not do anything or go anywhere without his hair being perfect, his clothes being perfect. His car was immaculate. You didn't eat in his car. You didn't drink in his car. You didn't sweat in his car. Your hands, you had to shower before you got into his car. No liquor in the car, no nothing, all right? And Albano traveled with Freddie.
Oh, God.
So Albano would be on last TV. And Freddie, because they were heels, motherfucker, Freddie would back the car up to the back door, motor running, and be ready. All Albano had to do was walk his last guy to the ring and come back and go right out the back door and get in Freddie's car.
But
God damn it, Lou, you know, go take your shower before you go out for the last match, put on clean shit, and get right out to the car. And so Pat, knowing this, Albano was probably drunk as shit, and he's going around doing all of his stuff. And as the match is finishing up and they're ready to come back and all stuff, Pat has a big fucking cup of Coke at the desk where they're doing commentary. And he goes, "Hey, Lou, I have a better case," and throws the Coke on Lou.
oh,
So Lou now is covered in Coke, but Lou can't stop there. Lou starts taking bumps all on the floor and shit and trying to get up. Now he's into the crowd and he's slipping in a filthy floor, and he's slipping in beer and shit and popcorn and all this other crap. And he's covered, and fucking Pat gets a beer from somebody and throws the beer on him. And then, "Hurry up, Lou. Goddamn, you gotta go. Freddie's waiting for you." And Lou gets up all disheveled and shit, reeking and fucking dripping with fucking soda and
sweat.
beer and popcorn and shit, and jumps into Freddie's car. And Freddie's got to cuss him out for 10 minutes before he takes off, because now Lou's fucking up his nice, clean car. And Pat would just, and then talk Freddie into giving Lou a ride the next night. And do the same thing. Lou didn't disappoint, man. Lou would fucking just give him an inch, he'll take 10 miles. At one time, I'm sorry, I'm fucking going off again. One time when Lou came back with us with the head shrinkers and shit, and Lou was coming back around, we were doing a lot of our TV in the Northeast. So Lou really wanted to do something with us. And he would come to me constantly. Hey kid, can you get me in with Vinny? Can you get me in with Vinny? I want to talk to him. I got an idea. I can do this thing with the tag team champions. You know, I manage more tag team champions than anybody in the world. All this stuff. Kid, if you just get me in. So I would try to avoid that and just say, hey Lou, man, you know, right now we're not doing anything. Well, Vince would send Lou to like me. And Lou would come to Vince and corner Vince and say, hey, Vinny, I got this. He goes, talk to Bruce. Go good idea, Lou. No, it sounds like a great idea. Go talk to Bruce. I'm trying to run a fucking show. This is in the middle of live shows and shit. And Lou would come up and sit down and start talking to me and pitching. I go, Lou, now's not a good time, man. He was like, Vinny told me to talk to you, kid. So this goes on a little bit to where finally, particularly busy night, Vince sent Lou to me. Well, Vince is doing commentary live. Tell you how I remedied that fucking deal. I sent Lou out to Vince in the commercial break.
There you go.
I said, hey, what's that? Okay, yeah, I'll send him out right now, Vince. And I sent Lou out. I said, he wants to talk to you at ringside. I think he wants you to do color on the next match. Just sit down with him, Lou, put the headset on, and just call color in the next match. What's he going to do? We're live. So Lou Albano did color, and I got the fuck you, Bruce. He didn't send Lou Albano to me anymore.
Let's talk about Bad News Allen for a minute here. I think one of his last big major things he does with the company as far as in-ring is he's teaming with Bad News Allen for the annual Madison Square Garden tag tournament. What was his relationship like with Bad News? Because they had worked together even back in California in the late 70s. And it was in the Observer that Bad News may have been the first person to call attention to Pat's preferences in a promo where he, trying to get heat, of course, and it's a different time, referred to Pat as a quote unquote she. I assume there was no heat about that, and those guys were still friendly as far as you knew.
Oh, absolutely they were. And Pat was one of the ones that had suggested Bad News to come in when he did in the 80s. You go back in one of the promos that Pat used to cut when he would go to Minneapolis and different things, he had a jacket that had oranges and shit all over it. And Pat would talk about, I come from California where we have the greatest fruits in the world. We have the freshest oranges. We have the freshest. All of our fruits are better than any other fruits anywhere in the world. Little double entendre, but it was one of Pat's favorite promos. And when I had the opportunity to grab a couple of jackets, he had the orange jacket. I almost grabbed it just for that story. Because he would always tell the story about being the freshest fruits and the best fruits come from California.
Talk to me a little bit about Montreal for a minute, because it's written that in the early 80s, when Andre owned a piece of the Montreal territory, he was going to sell it to Pat, but ultimately his shares to Pat, but ultimately they went to Dino Bravo. How different do you think wrestling could have been? I'm not saying that it would have wound up any different, but it is interesting to think about Pat Patterson perhaps becoming a partial owner in another territory, right?
Yeah. And it was Montreal, you know, the unfortunate thing about Montreal was it had so many different owners,
right?
And so many guys that had a piece of that pie and that were involved in that. And it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to Pat, not doing that and getting involved in it. But yeah, there were, you look at Georgia and the wrestlers, Jack and Jerry Briscoe owned a portion of it. Paul Jones owned a portion of it. Ole had a portion of it. It's just different guys that Barnett, you know, all these different guys. And it never, I think all those partnerships usually ended in disaster.
Oh yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, and I know this is switching gears a little bit, but we've often said here on the show, well, you know, Montreal was different. Let's talk about that for a moment. And Montreal being different. What was his relationship like with some of the other Montreal talents that we know, whether it's Dino, Rougeau, Rick Martel? Was Pat tight with those guys as well?
Yeah, they all stuck together. And maybe, I don't know if it was the same in Montreal, because a lot of times there appeared to be quite a bit of jealousy and infighting amongst themselves in Montreal. However, when you take them out, those guys kind of looked after each other and watched each other's back. So that was interesting. And it was evident, there was, before there was the clique, there was the quote Montreal clique, and people, felt that, well, they've got all this power and shit. It was no different. The names just change.
Let's talk a little bit about, some different folks that were really synonymous with Pat. We touched on Jerry Briscoe a little bit last week, and I think most everyone remembers their famous run, and maybe most notable run during the Attitude Era, as the Stooges. And boy, you guys had a lot of fun with some silly moments there. They had a match in drag. They had Hogan's music playing, and he comes out with like an iron-on shirt that says "First IC Champ," and he's doing the big poses. Pat and Jerry were having the time of their life in that era, were they not?
They were, because they were entertainers. And I think some of the guys might look at that and go, I would never want to do that. Pat embraced it. Jerry embraced it. It's why it was so damn good. It's why it had the highest rating in Raw history, because they went out and they had fun with it. And it's like, the base, we'll be the Stooges and we'll go have fun with it. When Pat did the stink face and they took Pat's pants off, he had his underwears on, not underwears. And you always knew how he put them on, because it was yellow in front, brown in the back. And at a pace, it was my favorite joke. Case. And it was like Pat's favorite joke about the swimming pool. Whenever anybody would come over to Vince's house, and for whatever reason, Vince had 2 thermometers in the pool to tell the temperature. And
You've told me this. You've told me this story before.
Yeah, and Pat, when he goes, that base, and look at him. He's so rich. He got 2 thermometers, one to tell how hot it is, one to tell how cold it is. And would laugh his fucking ass off.
Talk to me a little bit about guys that he would push for. We know famously that Pat Patterson is one of the key figures who talks Vince, and correct the rumor and innuendo, because I said we know. Maybe we have wrong information here, but it's been said a lot that Pat Patterson is one of the guys who has Vince's ear and says, you got to go with Brett. You got to go with Shawn. And somebody else that I didn't know that he was pushing for was Rey Mysterio. Was Pat Patterson important to the quote unquote push of Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Rey Mysterio?
Absolutely. I think that Shawn wouldn't have been in the position that Shawn was in had it not been for Pat advocating for him. And both Pat and I for so long just felt we had a baby face on our hands in Shawn Michaels. The audience loved him because he was just so fucking good. And Pat would, as I've often said, sometimes you have to be careful about how hard you may push for a talent, because it could have a negative and adverse effect on that talent. And I think that we pushed so hard for Shawn that Vince had an adverse reaction. He'll never be a baby face. But Pat never gave up. If
right.
Pat believed in you, he would fight for it, and was a big advocate. Pat loved Bret's work and thought that Bret was great. Just thoroughly enjoyed his work and pushed for Bret big time. As far as Ray winning the Royal Rumble, it was something that Pat pushed for from the standpoint no one would ever believe this little guy is going to win the Royal Rumble. And it was a beautiful story. The timing was right. And they did believe it. You know why they believed it? Because they saw it. So by God, it was there. And Pat was, you look at the early years of the formation of Titan Sports and the influence that Pat had working with Vince, just hand in hand. There was George Scott that worked directly with Vince and helping put matches together and everything. Pat was a road agent at the time. And then Vince was looking to make a change. And Pat just was in the right place at the right time. Vince needed help. Pat offered his help. And before you knew it, Pat was moving to Sanford and helping Vince all the time. There was a funny story that when Vince made Pat vice president, I don't think we called it talent relations then. I forget what the hell we called it. But maybe wrestling operations. Who the hell knows? And Vince and Linda took Pat out to dinner. And I said, Pat, I want to let you know that we made a decision, a company decision, and Linda and I would like to name you vice president of wrestling operations or whatever it is. And Pat sat there for a minute and said, okay. I don't know what the fuck that is, but okay, if you want to do it, fine. And Vince looks at Linda and says, see, I told you he wouldn't get it. He wouldn't, doesn't understand how important that is and what that means. And Pat looks at him and says, what the fuck? He goes, it's a title. It's a belt. You put it on me, you can take it off of me. The face. It's a work. Yeah. I don't know. Vice president. Yeah, great. Who cares? And that's the way Pat was. Titles were a prop. It was not important to him. It was, I think that he was proud of it, but it wasn't like, there are people
they live for the title.
They live for the title, man. We used to have, I'll never forget one of the, a marketing person, and it was a female, came up to me the first time that I met her and introduced herself to me as, hello, I am the senior vice president of marketing. I went, hello, senior.
Yeah.
She never gave me her name.
Right. She
gave me her title. I'm like, do you have a name? It's funny. And the Pat didn't buy into that. He was like, I just want to do my job. I just want to have fun. I want to go on at a pace and then create a little. It's like you're making a soup and you put. I like to put a little pepper in my soup, and then you put the noodles, you put the chicken. Sometimes I put the fucking meatball in right in the soup. You got too many fucking guys in here putting in all their fucking ingredients. Your soup tastes like shit. I want to cook my soup my way. And then Pat had the famous analogy that used to drive Vince banana was when we would reach a point of disagreement and you're kind of at a stalemate. I want this guy to go over. Well, I want that guy to go over. I think this is a better idea. I want to do it this way. I want to do it that way. And when Pat would get to the point of frustration where we're not getting anywhere, he goes, it's like ice cream. It's all ice cream. You like chocolate? I like vanilla. Pick a fucking flavor. And you just drive Vince crazy. He goes, it's not fucking ice cream, goddammit. And he goes, Vince, it's all the same. It's entertainment. It's wrestling. At a pace. You like it this way? I like it that way. It's still the same fucking shit. We just like it a different way. So yours is good. Mine's good. I don't know. Fucking Bruce likes strawberry. He fucking likes the fruits. That's, you look at those simple analogies, they all make sense.
I mean, I've been wondering, should I even bring this up? But you've told me a famous story. I don't know, the late 90s, we'll call it 97, 98. There was a celebrity tape that was on pay-per-view that everybody was talking about.
Oh God.
And there was a famous story that sometimes we would tease and you'd be like, oh, I can't do that. But you did do it on a few live shows. And he clearly was there for the joke. And I don't know. Do you feel comfortable sharing that story now?
No, yeah, it was, it was funny because Jerry Briscoe and Pat Patterson and I traveled up and down the highways for so many years. We there's just such a love and Pat, Jerry and I, we talked about everything. Nothing was off limits. And it just was a brotherhood and we loved fucking with each other. We loved ribbing each other. We loved, busting balls and what have you. And we were staying actually in Houston at the Sofitel Hotel near the airport. And we're going back and forth, I think San Antonio and Austin or something like that. But we were based in Houston. And the first day we get in the car and Jerry and I are talking and Pat's in the back seat. And I said, hey, man, what movies did you watch last night? And we were talking about our movies that we watched. And he's like, oh, you got to pay for that. I said, no, Pat. I said, the Spectrovision in the hotel, it's all free. They've got all that stuff, but like the little thing on you can watch whatever you want on there. I said, even the X-rated stuff, it's all free. And at the time, there was a famous celebrity tape out of Pam Anderson and Tommy Lee, very famous sex tape that had leaked out, and that was on the Spectrovision in the hotel. And so Pat, he goes, even the X-rated movies and everything, right? I said, yeah. And he says, well, what do they have good? I was like, I don't know. I mean, but they got the Pamela Lee, Tommy Lee tape. And Pat asked me, I'm going to clean it up. Pat asked me, what, he says, so this Tommy Lee, how's his private part? I'm like, I don't know, Pat. I mean, it's big. That's all I know, man. It's like a horror. It's big. So anyway, we travel on. We were unmercifully fucking with Pat on this particular trip about a lot of things. But we get back to the hotel that night. He can't wait to get away from me and Briscoe. And I said, hey, Pat, don't forget, the movies are free in the room. Okay. So.
And by the way, we should mention the movies are not free. It's going to be on his bill.
No, they were free.
Really?
They actually were free.
Oh, I thought that was the best part of the rib. He had to pay for the shit too.
No, he wouldn't know. It was like all you did was go to the channel and like they were up. They were free. And so we get in the car the next morning and we're driving along and I'm like, hey, Patrick, did you watch any movies last night? Oh, boy. Yeah, I turned on that fucking thing you told me about with the girl and the guy, and I'm fucking watching it. And I said, well, what'd you think? Oh, boy. Boring. Fucking boring. You start off, she takes it and kisses it, and the face goes, boy, I could show her a thing or two. He won.
You tried to rib him and he got you.
Oh, he won. Yeah, I mean, but it was absolutely hilarious, man. And we laughed our ass off. And of course, anybody that had ears at TV heard that story. And it was just, that was Pat Patterson, man. That was the beauty of it all. And you just it was that innocence of, no, I don't give a fuck anymore, man. By that point in his life, he didn't give a fuck. He was living his life. He was living his life to the fullest and having fun with it. Shit. Everybody should do, well, no, not that, but anyway.
Let's talk about his relationship with Lord Alfred Hayes. He wrote in his book about some hilarious ribs and traveling with Lord Alfred Hayes. And apparently Pat was such a bad snorer that Alfred would remove his mattress and put it in the bathroom so he could just sleep in there to just have some peace and quiet. And he even had another thing in his book where he says, Alfred had a fantastic brand new van for our travels. In the back, we played cards and drank beer. There was a hidden compartment under the ashtray, and I started stuffing all kinds of garbage in there, especially our empty beer bottles. After a few days, Alfred looked at me and said, Patrick, I don't understand. There's a weird noise and this van is brand new. It sounds like glass clicking together. I began laughing so hard he knew. I had to tell him what the noise was. Alfred never swore, which made it a funny companion for me. Pat was always a jokester, constant ribber, and I imagined that Lord Alfred Hayes was the perfect foil for all that.
Yeah, he was, and the beauty of it was that Alfred would not curse. So Alfred would be, "You have besmudged me, Patrick," and just come up with these words like, "Man, would you just call me?" You have absolutely no idea. And the more that Pat could get you, the more you got ribbed. And if there was something there to needle you on, he would definitely needle you. And it was the little innocent shit like that, you know, the beauty of a prank is someone leaves their shoes out. It's no fun to take both shoes.
Right.
That's not fun. That's just mean. However, if you just take one shoe, now that's funny, because now they have to look for the other shoe. And if there was ever somebody on the plane that would sit down and you'd be, you know, riding in first class or wherever the fuck you are, somebody would take off their shoes and go to sleep. Lo and behold, the end of the trip, when they would wake up and you'd land, they'd go down to put their shoes on, and one shoe would be missing. They would get down on their hands and knees and look under the seats both ways, and Pat would help them. Pat would get down in the aisle and look, "Oh, I think I see it way back there. It's way back there. I think I see it on the floor." And he would have either put it in the bathroom, you know, behind something, or he would have put it in the overhead in somebody else's bag, or just wherever. And he would actually help them look for a shoe that didn't exist. Laughing his ass off the whole time. And telling, "I think I see it." The other thing he would do is going through a crowded place, whether it be an airport or a mall or whatever, he go, you go, "Where's the dog?" Especially if a little kid's around. "Ah, you hear that doggy?" And the kid would look around and go, "Woo!" And the kid would look over here, and Pat would go on a chase for the imaginary dog that didn't exist with this kid.
Tremendous.
And the parents, and they're all looking around, and it was constant. Just absolutely constant. It was the same bit. It was like, watching Henny Youngman 100 times in a row, but it was always funny.
When he's transitioning to being more backstage, he's working as a road agent with Jay Strongbow, Rene Goulet, and Jack Lanza. That's quite the cast of characters right there, is it not?
Well, that's to say the least. Yeah, and Pat thoroughly enjoyed ribbing Jay Strongbow, just because Chief sold. And it would be Vince and Pat on the phone with Strongbow. And it was during the time that you had payphones. So the agents used to carry around rolls of quarters in their briefcases. I mean, rolls, because you would have to sit there. You'd have to make 1 million calls at the airport or wherever you were. And you have to put the quarters in and all that shit. So Strongbow would call to get the finishes for that night. And Pat would go, "Okay, yeah, Jay, did you do the, oh my, what? Jay, did you hear about what happened with Piper?" Click. Hang up. Jay would put another quarter. You didn't have cell phones.
Right.
Jay would have to put another quarter in, call again. "Why the fuck you hang up on me?" God damn it, I was getting ready to tell you, you got to know about what happened with Piper the other night because you got to click. And he would do it like 10 times in a fucking row. Jay's now 250 in, and he's a cheap son of a bitch. And he's pissed. And he just wants to know what happened with Piper. I'll put him over tonight. Okay. Call me after the show. Click. And just constantly do that kind of shit. We sent Jay one time when Doink started on the road and everything. It was Doink's first show on the road. We sent him out as a replacement. So we didn't have all the makeup and all that shit. He didn't have it for the road. He had only done television. We had professional makeup artists and everything. And so we told Strongbow to go to the store to get clown makeup. Well, Strongbow ain't going to do much other than go from his hotel room to the building and back. There ain't going to be any stops in between. But this was, God damn it, Jay. You have to go do this to make sure it's done right. And they give him a list of all this shit to get. And in the middle of the list is Tux. Wimpy. Chief called Pat Wimpy. Wimpy. What's his tux? It's the thing for the clown. Get the fucking tux. And the thought was in our mind that Jay Strongbow is going to go somewhere and he's asking someone for tux, which is hemorrhoidal wipes. And they're going to be looking at this large balding man asking for tux. And he's not quiet. He probably would have asked loud. But of course, Chief double-crossed us and sent a runner to go get the shit, and it wasn't as funny.
How about this whole time? I thought you meant tux, like, a tuxedo. And I'm like, you don't even know what's
it's a hemorrhoidal cream.
How would I have known that? I don't have hemorrhoids.
You don't see the fucking commercial for tux?
No, I have a DVR. They don't have commercials in 2020. This hemorrhoid cream you speak of.
Yeah, it's like they're pads.
Nah.
And it's got the medication in it.
I think we're watching different stuff, bud.
I saw some tux in your medicine cabinet at the house. Don't fucking bullshit me.
First of all, I don't have a medicine cabinet. Let's talk about,
yeah, but I go through your shit in your bathroom when you're not there.
Well, that checks out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's right.
Let's talk about another
Mr.
prank.
Tucky McGee.
Tucky McGee. That'll be a shirt.
Tucky Thompson.
Fuck off with all this.
Tucky Thompson.
You know what? Let's talk about something that you and again, I don't know if you want to share this, but you mentioned earlier that Pat had the big place in Connecticut, the 3-story treehouse, Chez Gimmick, but he relocated to Florida and you ribbed him unmercifully about his new destination, not just moving to Florida, but specifically where he moved. And you had quite a bit of fun.
I don't know where the fuck you're going with that. I know I used to fuck with him when he went to Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. This is probably the same story.
Okay. And he look, man, he moved into a goddamn trailer park.
This is the one.
Okay. He moved into a fucking French Canadian trailer park. And he had a beautiful trailer. Okay. Yeah. Or a mobile home. I'm sorry.
But he would get really hot when you called it trailer.
But I know he got hot when I called it a mobile home.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. And so it's like, we'd say, hey, Pat, how's life at the trailer park? Fuck you. I don't live in a trailer park. I said, oh, okay. The mobile home park. Fuck you. It's not a mobile home. I said, Pat, it's a goddamn mobile home. They delivered it on the back of a fucking truck and put it together. It's a modular home. It's not a mobile home. Fuck you. But he would get so upset when I would say, "Hey man, how's the trailer fucking park going, man? I live in a modular home. It's a beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. I got the French Canadian. Everybody speaks French there. I've been in Montreal at a pace. Yeah, he fucking lived in a goddamn modular home. Well, the fucking trailer."
One of the times when we did a show down in Florida, Pat came to meet us, and he slid in the parking lot on 2 wheels in that turbo Porsche SUV that he had. Was Pat always a car guy?
No, not at all. And that was one of the funny things when he showed up in the Porsche, was because Pat, for the most part, always had like a Lincoln Town Car, just comfortable, simple, and didn't really care. Then I think he got a convertible when he went to Florida. Maybe like a Chrysler LeBaron. That was Bobby Heenan's ride, man. The Chrysler LeBaron convertible. But yeah, when Pat came in that fucking Porsche, man, that was the first car that he ever bought for himself. That was a gimmick car, that, as he called it. I love my gimmick car. Fuck it. I'm fucking 70 years old. Fuck you. At a pace.
Did Pat smoke his entire life, as far as, when you knew him?
Oh, goddamn, yes. Yeah, he quit probably 5-6 years ago, and there were different times that he would try and quit through the years. But yes, Pat smoked all the fucking time. When the no smoking thing, really became big. And you got to remember, man, we're old, and you probably don't remember, but there were, everywhere you would go in restaurants, you had a smoking section, a non-smoking section.
Right. I remember.
And people smoked in lobbies all over the place, and in
the office and airplanes and everywhere.
And so when you'd walk in and they started the no smoking bans everywhere, they would usually have a sign that would say, "Thank you for not smoking." And Pat would usually stand right in front of the sign and light up and go, "Don't thank me, motherfucker." And just smoke a cigarette. And he would try and hide it, in his hand and shit, hold it a certain way and hide it. And someone would come and say, "Put your cigarette out." "No, it wasn't to me. It was him over there." And then smoke it and get rid of it and trash it. But yeah, Pat. And when we started with the pyro, okay, on the television shows, and that Raw's where we had those big explosions and shit. Well, that was all new for us. And Pat would walk out with a fucking cigarette, 3 feet from enough pyro to blow us all to kingdom come. And what do you want from me? I don't fucking know. Okay, I put it out. He'll go to put it out and throw it like right next to the pyro, not having a clue. But yeah, Pat smoked a lot. Never smoked pot. Pat just liked his vodka tonics.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. His go-to drink was vodka tonic. What was his favorite vodka? Do you recall?
I don't give a fuck. It's vodka. Don't try to charge me for that extra shit. Just give me some fucking vodka. Didn't give a shit.
There's a story he wrote in his book about him and Vince in Houston once. He says, "We're waiting for our plane with 45 minutes to kill. I decided to go to the restroom and smoke a cigarette. You could do that back then. Someone took the stall right beside me, and then the person spoke. 'Patrick, open up your book. We're going to check our numbers to see if we should run that town again after tonight.'" In the toilet, conducting business. When I said Houston, you knew the story.
Oh yeah, at the fucking airport, man. And Pat was like, just couldn't wait to get away from Vince. Goes in, take a shit, have a cigarette, gonna sit in the stall, smoke. Next thing you know, yeah, Vince is there. Get your book out. We would ride with Vince into New York to get a haircut. And one of the best nights that the three of us ever had together. So much fucking fun. But we started at the house, and it's like 3:00 in the afternoon. And Vince says, I got to go into the city to get a haircut. Let's go, guys. Why the fuck do we have to go? God damn, we'll get some work done. So we go into the city. He's going to a new place. All right. And he used to go to this one place to get his hair cut. Now he's going to this place in the basement of the St. Regis Hotel in Manhattan. Well, we knew the other place, had bars and shit around it, had a bar in the hotel and everything, and nice, and a lot of bars and shit around it. So Vince goes in to get his hair cut, and Pat and I are sitting there, and he's like, what do you want to do? Yeah, fuck this. I'm going to go have a drink. We walk around, we go down, and we go to the bar in the St. Regis. And I go up, I ordered a vodka tonic and a Coors Light. It was like $13.50. Now again, this was a while ago where fucking Coors Light and a vodka tonic should cost like $7.
Right.
And I'm like, $13.50. I said, no, I just want one Coors Light and one vodka tonic. Yeah, $13.50. Motherfucker. So I bring it back. I tell Pat how much it costs. Fuck this place. So we go walking around trying to find a bar.
Right.
Nothing close. Nothing. So we're waiting now. It's been about, 45 minutes or so. And we know Vince has to get his fucking hair cut, his nails done, his shoes shined, all this other shit. And it's like, God damn, I want another. Fuck, I've got to find something to drink. I said, Pat, we go back into the St. Regis. I said, we're standing there. Bar's now it's crowded. And these three women get up from a table right where we're standing. I said, let's just sit down here. We'll order a round of drinks and we'll have a few drinks and whatever here. Vince is going to finish up soon. He's got to come find us. He's not going to leave us. He'll come find us. When he comes to find us, we'll get him a drink. And then he'll sit down. We'll have a couple drinks with him. He'll pick up the tab. Don't worry about it. So Pat and I have a few drinks. And sure enough, here comes Vince around the corner. He's looking for us on cue. Waitress is there. I said, hey, yeah, bring us another round of drinks and add a double doers on the rocks for him. Thank you very much. Get on your way before he can say no. She comes right back. She brings the drinks down. I said, go ahead and bring us another round. Come back, and Vince has finished the second drink now, and he's like, all right, guys, what are we going to do? And we're like, well, I don't know. Fuck, man. It's like 6 something now, or 6:30, almost 7 o'clock. And fuck, man. I don't know. We'll go back. Now, he's already had 2 doubles. Pat and I have been sitting there drinking for about 45 minutes. And I was like, fuck it. Let's go to dinner, man. Let's go do something. And waitress comes by and he says, yeah, just bring us our tab. She brings him the fucking tab.
Oh.
And it was a little steep. And he looks at us, Jesus Christ, how long have you guys been here? But he paid for it, just like we knew. But then that night, it was so fucking fun, man. We went to all of our spots in New York. And so we had drinks there. We went to Jimmy Weston's, which was his dad's favorite restaurant that he used to eat after the Garden every night. We went to Jimmy Weston's and had drinks, and we had some hors d'oeuvres. Then we went to this Italian place where he had like some spaghettis, as Pat would say. We had some pasta and some shit. Then we went and we ate at, God damn it, the grill, Smith & Wollensky's grill.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Jimmy Weston's eventually became, like, that was his go-to spot. But then eventually, Smith & Wollensky's became his go-to spot. He being Vince, pronouns pal.
Yeah, the grill. Yeah, we would go to the grill after the Garden.
The right side, that's the bar, not the
it's
main
like
dining
the bar, and they got tables and shit in there and everything. And it's just a little livelier.
Yeah.
And so then we went there for dinner, and then we went to Gallagher Steakhouse for rice pudding for dessert. Then we went to go have drinks and have meat pies because there was this Argentinian restaurant bar that Andre used to go to and have meat pies. So we had to go there to have basically our nightcap and get a fucking meat pie. So it was just the best night, best day, because at 3 o'clock we left the house, went into the city, and then we just, fuck it. We're in the city. Let's go. let's just go and have a good fucking night. And we hit all of our spots and went home.
You know, one of the things we didn't spend a lot of time talking about last week, but Pat Patterson was a big part of WrestleMania 1. Muhammad Ali was, of course, going to be there for the festivities, and Pat Patterson's there. And you fast forward in WrestleMania 4, we see, coming down the ringside, and Pat is her escort. He's got his hands out on both sides to protect her. He did the same thing with WrestleMania 10. He would write in his book that he made sure he walked behind him to make sure no one could try to pull his hair, because of course Burt was wearing a wig. And allegedly he even told Donald Trump about it, but Pat loved the interaction with the celebrities and, being the buffer between them and the fans whenever possible. Right.
Well, you know why Pat was in with Ali at WrestleMania 1, because Pat had worked with all those guys all during the week, laying out the match with Mr. T. And Pat knew the match forward and backwards as well as everyone else. And Ali was, didn't have a clue. I don't know that, the Parkinson's is really, but he was an outsider. You're putting him in there with three guys that are pros and Mr. T, who also was a outsider in there. So when they're looking at it, I go, well, fuck, man, you got Muhammad Ali refereeing. He doesn't know how to referee. So he goes, we'll put Ali on the outside, have him be the outside enforcer referee. We'll come up with a spot for Ali to get involved. But Pat was in there to maintain control and keep everybody calm and make sure that everybody got through the match, but also to kind of keep an eye on Ali on the outside of the ring, who really wanted to get involved. And Pat was really good friends with Liberace. Barnett was friends with Liberace as well. And, Pat Patterson, it was always funny when holy shit, Mike Tyson, when Tyson came back and Tyson met Pat, it was like meeting God. He was like, oh my God, Pat Patterson, I watched you when I was a little kid. I remember you matching. And he just was enamored with Pat. And then when Pat is helping Mike through all of this stuff, it was like, oh my God, I'm working with Pat Patterson. And it was mutual, that a lot of the older guys and younger guys had seen Pat through the years working, and now he's backstage. So there was, they knew each other from afar, from their celebrity. And yeah, Pat loved that shit. President Clinton look-alike. Oh my God. We laughed and just cut up with that guy forever.
There was a great story in his book where he talks about working with Chuck Norris. Of course, Chuck Norris was at the Survivor Series in '94, and he would note that Pat wrote in his book that Chuck was kind of nervous about what all they were going to do that night and didn't want to do the wrong thing. And Pat, trying to calm him down, supposedly said, "Don't worry, I'm Pat Patterson. I'll take care of everything." And he says that Chuck replied, "I'm Chuck Norris and I trust you." Considering all the fun that we've had on the internet over the last few years with Chuck Norris, that's pretty hilarious.
Absolutely, man. And it was that actually fucking happened. We were upstairs in the Joe and Harry Freeman Coliseum, and it was like, don't you worry about a damn thing. Chuck had his kicking jeans on and said, and I told him, I said, Chuck, you just throw it. I said, Jeff will be there. And Jeff took a big bump, and you can see, if you go back and watch it, you'll see a huge smile on Chuck Norris's face once he nails the kick on Jeff, and Jeff takes this huge bump and makes him look like $1 million. And he come back, I told you, you're Chuck Norris at a pace. And he turns to me and goes, who the fuck is this guy? No, not true.
I know you weren't there at the time, but did you watch Legends House on the network?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, obviously you knew all of those guys really well, but they had like a big payoff where Pat sort of officially came out, if you will. And it was a tearful affair. And we had seen you know, a nod in that direction in commentary a few times by Jim Ross and certainly the double entendres that you mentioned earlier. And he made a big to do in his Hall of Fame speech, which we touched on last week, where he was sort of saying he was going to share the award with Louie. But you had to be moved, even if you knew that by that point it wasn't exactly a secret. It was a big deal for Pat Patterson to sort of share that part of his life with the world, right?
It was a big deal for Pat to say it out loud.
Yeah.
And to embrace it and not give a shit, you know, and it was, look, Pat had a difficult life because of some of his life choices, and that's just wrong. So for Pat to be able to come out in his way on his terms, good for him. Fuck everybody. And that was some funny shit. It was there during that Legends house. So they're locked down in this house. All right. And they got these reality TV producers and shit doing this. And their whole thing is, oh my God, it's got to be real. You know, we have to control you guys the entire time. And you can't leave the house, and we're recording everything. We have cameras everywhere and blah, 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 blah. Motherfucker, we come from a world of make believe, and we come from a world of entertainment. It's like, you can turn the camera off and let us just be us. And Pat and Gene had reached a point of frustration to where they could not be in that house anymore. They were sick of everybody. And they talked one of the producers into, after a shoot that they had done outside of the house, they said, get us a car and take us, I think it was outside of San Diego or something like that, and take us downtown to this place. He goes, there's a strip of bars there. He goes, and we're going to get a drink. And so the car takes them down, and everybody else goes back to the house. And they're all wondering, where's Pat and Gene? And Pat takes Gene down. They hit a couple bars, and they're supposed to have one drink. And now they shook the producer, and they shook the car, and they're going down, and they get into this one bar, and Gene's had a few, Pat's had a few, and Okerlund starts looking around and says, good Lord, Pat, these are some of the ugliest girls I've ever seen in my life. And Pat goes, oh, we're in a drag bar. And just got the biggest kick out of it. So now they go out and they're trying to find their car that they shook, but now they want it because now they're drunk and they want to go home. Back at the house, everybody's pissed. So they're like, you know what? Fuck them. Lock all the doors, turn all the lights off. I said, they're out doing shit. We're stuck here in this fucking house. We can't go out. We can't do shit. And Piper and Duggan and those guys are like, lock everything down. Hear the car come up. They hear Gene and Pat get out, and they turn all the lights off, and they're waiting. And they're waiting for him to come up and try the door and all this shit. And they're going to watch him go all the way around the house and try all the doors. And then they're going to jump them when they come in. So they're all sitting there waiting and listening and all this stuff. And Pat and Gene walk up to the front door, take the handle, open the door, and walk in. And Duggan's like, God damn it, Jimmy! We told you to lock the front door. And Jimmy goes, well, baby, they wouldn't have been able to get in if I locked all the doors. Yeah. And everybody was just so fucking hot, and Pat and Jim, oh, fuck out of place, we went out. And they tell on themselves, tell everything that they did. So yeah, there was a little heat in that house, but it was quite entertaining, apparently. I enjoyed it, with everybody on there. It was interesting.
When you get fired again, can we do an ad-free show's house with you and Tony Schiavone and Jim Ross and Arn Anderson and Eric Bischoff in the same house?
Good Lord. It wouldn't last the night.
Well, it'd be hilarious. We get a lot of great footage.
Oh, God damn.
Hey, we're going to tell a few more stories and then we'll wrap it up. It was in the Observer, and it's been reported a lot of other places too, that Pat did not know the plans for the Montreal Screwjob, but he was important as far as laying out the match and even suggesting the sharpshooter.
No,
But
see, once again, Dave Meltzer's fucking wrong.
Okay. My point
Wrong.
is, I didn't even get to finish. He didn't know that there was going to be a screw job, and allegedly, Vince wanted to insulate him from that because he wanted the talent to be able to trust him. And he knew that this could have serious repercussions. How tore up was Pat about the screw job, knowing how close and how important he was to both the careers of not only Shawn Michaels, but Bret Hart?
Yeah, Pat was really torn up, but again, to correct, the gossip monger's, statement, Bret Hart suggested the sharpshooter, in that spot. So Pat was the agent, but Pat did not know, what was going to take place.
Right.
And after it happened, Pat watched it and Pat was disgusted, and he was so mad that, he started to leave. And Pat thought about it, and he walked out and he thought about it. He says, if he left, he felt that would make him look guilty.
Right.
And the more he thought about it, the more, he was like, fuck that. And he walked into Bret and said, Bret, standing in front of you, I knew nothing. You want to punch me out? Punch me out. But I'm standing here looking you in your eye, and I didn't know a damn thing. And I love you. And, I'm sorry, but I just wanted you to know that. And, Bret shook his hand, and it was what it was. But no, Pat didn't have a clue. Not a clue.
There was another rumor that you and I've touched on before, I believe, that, and he even wrote in his book, there was another rumor that I quit the business in 2004 as Triple H was starting to assume more responsibilities. Now that's complete bullshit. Believe me, when I write this, I was burned out at the time, and it was probably the third or fourth time I've quit. I lost count. But no, I don't want Paul to fail. In fact, the opposite is true. I desperately want him to succeed. I want the business to continue to thrive after I'm gone, after Vince is gone. Paul knows he's now part of the family. He knows because I've said to him, I'm not looking for a job, but if I can ever help you with anything, just ask and I'll be there. I'll be there for you just as I was for Vince and his dad. You'll always get the truth out of me. Where do you think these stories, if you will, because that's been said a lot, that Pat Patterson and Triple H didn't get along. You saw them interact. You know the truth. That doesn't just grow on trees, does it?
Yeah, apparently it does.
Okay.
Because it's not the truth at all. Pat, and go back to the early days with Triple H, and Pat was a huge fan and saw something in Triple H that other people didn't see, and was a big advocate.
I'm not saying you didn't like him. I guess what I'm saying is, would that story come out perhaps as an overreaction to people seeing them have a disagreement about, cause not everybody's gonna, like, if you're just freestyling ideas, there's going to be some people who like an idea and other people who don't. And perhaps they witness that and assume in one of these brainstorming sessions or powwows that, oh, these guys just don't. And especially when Pat does decide he's going to leave, maybe people try to put 2 and 2 together and connect the dots where really there is no connection.
There's nothing to that. Nothing to it at all.
Talk to us about
it's just not true.
What about The Rock? He gets a lot of credit for being the guy who really discovered The Rock.
Thank you for bringing that up. 100% Pat Patterson. And to set the record straight too, I was doing talent relations at the time. Pat called me about this kid, Dewey Johnson.
Yeah.
And his father, Rocky's kid. Okay. Rocky Johnson's kid, man. Shit. It's fucking third generation. Holy shit. He goes, he's been playing football in Canada. He's really down. I've seen him in the ring. Oh my God, he's a natural, but he needs to be trained. He goes, I've, done some things with him and shit. And asked us if we would take a look at him. Brought him to, I think Houston was the first place that we brought him to for a television taping, worked with the Brawler. And that was Pat. Vince at the time was like, he goes, I don't know, what have you. And then signed him to a developmental deal with, same time we signed Mark Henry and Akam Albrecht and all those guys. But 100%, Pat Patterson was the guy that introduced us to him. Pat was the one that brought him in. Pat, I credit Pat 100% for discovering The Rock and having the confidence in him from day one. And yes, Pat definitely pushed The Rock, and rightfully so, and had a passion for The Rock, and loved the character and loved the human being, and was there for him every step of the way. So, Pat 100% recruited The Rock, got him his first match, whole 9 yards.
And he wrote in his book that, that Rock had an in at the FBI, but he wanted to try wrestling first. Isn't it remarkable to think how differently everything is? Not just wrestling, not just the company, but just pop culture, in Hollywood over the last, 2 decades. Had The Rock actually pursued his quote unquote in at the FBI?
Yeah, no shit. It'd be a different world, wouldn't it?
Listen, I don't want to go out on a bad note, but I do want to at least address something that we got blown up with in comments, because Pat addressed it in his book. He wrote, quote, over the years, I've just ignored all the casting couch innuendo made towards me and my work at WWE. I was smarter than that. It still hurts, but there was really no way for me to defend myself. I became the disappointed wannabe wrestler's ultimate excuse for why they weren't offered a contract. And that's just silly. People who are unhappy use the fact that I am gay to get back at WWE. To all the people who have ever said they weren't hired because they were not gay, I can only say, guys, I'm sorry. You were just not good enough. That's from Pat's book, Accepted. I know that, a lot's been written about it, and you can read Meltzer's obituary if you want more details. It's probably not the forum for us to dig into it, but Meltzer did sum it up with this one sentence. The Ring Boy stuff had no connection with Patterson as far as anyone could tell. Only Garvin and Phillips, who never returned. The synopsis I've always heard, Bruce, is, for whatever reason, when these allegations came out, and there were certainly some fire to that smoke when in regards to Garvin and Phillips, but perhaps unfairly, maybe because he joked about it and he was a little more open, and maybe just because it was known that he was gay, he was lumped in there rather unfairly. That's always been the story that I've understood and what I've read over and over from Wade Keller and Dave Meltzer, and even in Pat's book. You were there. I wasn't. What would you like to address, if anything, and put this to bed?
I spent more time with Pat Patterson, through the years than we did with our spouses, and the allegations. It's just complete bullshit. I won't even dignify it with an answer, because it's just rumor, innuendo, and it's bullshit, and it's hurtful, and it's wrong. And Pat, I think, summed it up best, is that it's from a lot of disgruntled people that, maybe just weren't good enough to make it, and were looking for an excuse and thought that he would be an easy excuse. The human being, Pat Patterson, I love to death, and he was part of my family. My kids, when they were born, oh my God, looking at those pictures, holy shit, it was just so hard this past week. Just the love. And here was a beautiful, wonderful human being, judged by people that never knew him, never spent a minute getting to know the person. And for that, I'm sorry for you, because you missed out on meeting one of the warmest, most genuine human beings on the face of the earth.
And I'm thankful to have had the time that I got to spend with him, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the entire world, because he taught me so much about life in general. And I will love him till the day I die, and look forward to seeing him in a future life on down the road. But to the people that want to say negative, I won't dignify your negativity with a response. I'm sorry that you never got to know the man, Pat Patterson, and I'm fortunate that I did.
Let's try to leave on a high note here, because this has been a great celebration of life, but I did feel like we should probably just address the nonsense and move on. But man, what a legacy he's going to leave behind. Not just the first Intercontinental champion, not just the creator of the Royal Rumble, but so much more. I'm curious, I know we don't talk about current stuff, but would it shock you the way Andre the Giant has been memorialized with the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal? Would it shock you to see some sort of situation or program or match concept or pay-per-view or tournament or whatever dedicated to Pat Patterson?
No, it wouldn't shock me at all. And I think it should happen because, again, so many of the things that you do see, to those that know, that it already is a dedication to Pat, because we know that it was something that he created from a place of creation, I guess is the best way. Pat was a creator, and a damn great one.
One of the best. And, I just want to play armchair quarterback here and just ask hypothetically, because we have talked a lot about Pat's sexuality and how challenging that could be in the time and place which he came up. We talked about it a lot more last week, but I couldn't help but think this past week, what do you think his career would have looked like had he not been homosexual? And I know that sounds weird, but on some level it does make you wonder, was he more behind the scenes? Did he have some sort of ceiling just based on that? Maybe for whatever reason, Vince didn't feel like he could put him out front and make him the champion and the top star and make a big run. Or maybe he would have had more opportunities with a WCW. Like, I even talked to Eric Bischoff about this off the air one day. If he could have made one key acquisition from the WWF, who would it have been? And he thought for a while, and the answer was Pat Patterson. They didn't have a guy who could be the finish guy and the genius. Certainly they had a guy who knew how to quote unquote book heat like Kevin Sullivan, but Pat Patterson was wrestling Yoda, as Jericho said, and he perhaps could have leveled everything up. But maybe in a weird way, his sexual orientation could have been, I don't know.
I think that is absolutely nothing to it.
You don't think that his career would have been any different whatsoever?
Look at how great his career was.
No, I'm not arguing that at all.
But it never held him back. It never held him back because of the human being that Pat was and the talent that Pat was.
Well, let me clarify, I guess. We've briefly addressed the rumors and the innuendos that are out there. And, there was even an accusation made with his name on Donahue, and that was a big deal.
All false.
I'm not arguing.
All false, but it didn't hold him back. It didn't hold him back. He still went on to be the creator and continue to create and innovate without. So, I mean, to that, I say that there's nothing to it. And I don't think it would have changed a thing at all. And again, Pat Patterson wasn't the guy that wanted to be world champion.
Right.
He just wanted to be Pat Patterson. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do and be the best at it. And he was. He was celebrated for that.
I think one of the things you probably liked best about working with Pat, and I could be wrong, but sometimes we talk about guys who took themselves too seriously. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for that, certainly. But Pat never struck me as that. Pat was always the guy who was just looking to enjoy the moment. And I think that's probably a lesson in life about just making the most out of every day and every moment and every experience. And he was not necessarily there to steal a Hillbilly Jim line. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. Is that Pat Patterson?
Yeah, Pat, but I do think Pat wanted to make a difference, and Pat did, and everything in every life that he touched in a positive way.
Well, boys and girls, we hope you've enjoyed, gosh, now episode 3, 3 shows in this last week, all about Pat Patterson. You know, next week we've got a fun show scheduled. Last week we were supposed to do Armageddon 05. This week we were supposed to do Rey Mysterio Jr., but I bumped it for Armageddon 05. Next week we're supposed to do In Your House 5, but at this rate, it might be Pat Patterson episode 4. But if
Depends on what kind of mood I'm in.
If we actually do In Your House 5, here's what we'll be talking about. Bret Hart and the British Bulldog for the world title, The Undertaker and King Mabel in a casket match, Owen versus Diesel, Hunter versus Henry O. Godwin in an Arkansas hog pen match with Hillbilly Jim as the special guest referee.
Oh, goddamn, that was in Hershey.
That's exactly right. Ahmed.
That was a fun night.
I bet there's a story about those pigs, isn't there?
There sure is.
We're going to find out next week. We hope, but you know what? I won't be disappointed if it's another episode about Pat Patterson. I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have. It's certainly been a departure for us, but Bruce, if I dare say, this almost feels like maybe it's been a therapeutic process for you to talk about your friend Pat.
You just took the words out of my mouth, and I thank you to our wonderful, awesome audience for indulging me.
Well, we had a great time. We'd love to have your feedback. He is at Bruce Prichard. I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we are out of time. If you've got a question about next week's In Your House 5, cruise on over right now to at Prichard Show and pick it up there. And don't worry, we've got a couple of special bonus episodes brought to you by Geico coming later this month. That's right. Not 1, but 2 bonus episodes of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. And as always, you get all these shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. There's also tons of incredible footage of Pat Patterson in our live shows, Pat Patterson singing on stage at StarCast, and so many of those live shows. We've had a blast with Pat, and it's been fun going back down memory lane. And if it's all right with you, maybe we could have you sing us a song to wrap us up here today. What do you think?
What song you want?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking maybe we've heard his version of My Way. You said you're a great singer.
I am.
Ha! Well, Jimmy, honey, what do you say? I got a brand new record that I gotta play. She says, knock down, boy, but I did it anyway, cause I'm ready. So ready. That?
Yeah. Pat did a much better job at karaoke.
I don't think so.
See you next week, boys and girls, right here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
Rock on.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.